My name is Christy Pruitt Haynes. I am a speaker, consultant, and coach based in Nashville, Tennessee. I work with clients all over the world on issues around leadership. Hello, my name is Christy Pruitt Haynes. I am a speaker, consultant, and coach based in Nashville, Tennessee. I work with clients all over the world on issues around leadership development, diversity, strategy, and communications. What I want to talk to you about today is talking. Actually, it's not just talking. I want to talk about communication in general. We're going to spend a few minutes together discussing communication strategies and how to use them to get what you want out of a situation. Now, it's really important to understand communication is a lot more than the words we say. Obviously, that's a huge part of it, but it includes everything from our body language, our gestures, how much we use our hands when we talk. But it also deals with what is most important to us when it comes to communication. Are you somebody who likes to know the what of a situation? What are we trying to do? What do we want to accomplish? Do you prefer knowing the who? Who's involved? Who is this going to help? All of those things play into your communication style and the preferences that you have. More importantly, it also plays into the communication style of the people that you interact with. The better you can understand that, the better you can use these tips and these strategies to use communication to your advantage. Now, the first thing you have to do is know your own communication style. So pause the video for a moment. I want you to come back after you've downloaded and taken the communication quiz. It only takes 5 minutes. And if you do it on a computer, the quiz will actually score itself. But you can then use that to determine your style. And when you come back, we're going to talk about what the different styles mean, how to interpret them, how to detect them in others, and how to use all of this information to your advantage. Go take your quiz. I'll be right here waiting. Now that you've taken your quiz, let's talk about what those results mean. There are four different communication styles we're going to talk about today, and most people fall into one of those four. Let me say a few things before we start talking about the four styles. There is no style that's better than the others. Now, there will be styles that you find it easier to understand and easier to communicate with, but the truth is, we need all of those styles when we are trying to figure out a problem or discuss a situation. Now, the second thing I want you to keep in mind is while this quiz revealed your preferred style, you have the ability to adjust and flex to other styles as the situation requires. We're going to talk about that more in just a bit. But let's dive in. Let's talk about those first four styles. The first one we want to discuss is the analytical. Now, I don't really like to use stereotypes, but if I did, the analytical is that stereotypical accountant. This is the person who does a lot of research. They're great with details. They ask a lot of how questions. How are we going to accomplish this? How are we going to get from here to here? More importantly, in meetings, that's the information they want to know. They want to know the how of situations. Now, that doesn't mean they don't want to know all of the information, because the truth is, they really do. Analyticals tend to think before they speak. They like to evaluate the pros and cons. They want to know the facts, and they're going to be very thoughtful about their responses. Now, some people think analyticals aren't as engaged as other styles. That is absolutely not the case. Analyticals actually just spend more time digesting all of the information, all of the facts, factoring it all in. And then when they do give you an answer, when they do make that decision, I can guarantee you it is going to be thoughtful and it is going to be very intentional. Now, analyticals are wonderful people to have on projects at work. They can help you get down through those details, really dig through the weeds of something that some of the other styles tend to ignore. Now, that's the first of the four. Let's talk about the second. Who's an amiable out there? Your amiables are the people who are going to ask a lot of why questions. Why are we changing this? Why are we taking this approach? Amiables tend to shy away from conflict. That doesn't mean they don't care or they don't have an opinion one way or the other. It's just that typically they like to have everybody working harmoniously and working together. Amiables may not be the first person to speak up in a meeting, but when they do speak, they are going to bring information that will help unify the team. Amiables tend to be very conscientious. They tend to really factor everything and everybody in, and they like to make sure that the final result is going to be a win win for both parties. Amiables are great people to have in the workplace, and they really help push all situations a little further, but do it in a way that ultimately brings people together. Now, the opposite of an amiable is a driver. A driver is the person that asks the what questions. What are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the goal here? Your driver is that stereotypical type A personality. Sometimes they can come off as a bull in a china shop. Your driver may not be the person who asks how you're doing. They're instead just going to tell you, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's what I need from you. Drivers tend to be a little impatient, but also very quick to come up with a new idea or a new concept. Drivers tend to tell more than they ask. Now, the previous two styles, both analytical and amiable, they both tend to ask more questions than give more information. Neither of those styles are typically the first to speak up. Now, your driver, they have no problem throwing their opinion out there and stating it boldly. When it comes time to make a decision and everybody's stuck weighing the option or doing what I like to call analysis paralysis, a driver will push right through and say, here's what we're doing. Drivers can be great leaders if they keep in mind how to bring everyone with them. Now, the final of the four styles that we're going to talk about is my personal favorite just because it's what I am, the expressive. Now, expressives are big idea people. We tend to talk with our hands. We tend to be expressive. Expressives also can sometimes be impatient with others. We tend to talk and tell more than we ask. Expressives typically don't have a lot of problems giving their information and sharing an idea off the top of their head. Expressives can also be someone who is great at planning an event, planning a party, but it's possible they're going to forget to book the room because they aren't always the best at details. That's something they share in common with drivers. Whereas your analyticals are going to be very detail oriented, your expressives may be more of that big picture strategy person. Again, neither is right nor wrong. And ultimately, you need all of these styles in the workplace. It's interesting. Here in the United States, a lot of people tend to think people who share their opinion more, people who tend to be a little more extroverted, have better ideas. That means they oftentimes lead more towards a driver or an expressive just because drivers and expressives tend to be more vocal. That's not always the case. Sometimes the best idea in the room can come from the person who's really been paying attention to the needs of everybody. That might be an amiable, or the person who's really been digging into all of the facts. That could be an analytical. There are going to be other times when you need that big strategy, you need those big ideas. Likely that's going to come from an expressive. And finally, there could be a time where you just have to push through and get stuff done. That's when you're going to need a driver. So, as you can see, all four styles have their strengths, and all four styles are really needed in so many different situations. Now, here's where I want you to pause the video again. You've also received a more detailed explanation of each of the styles. It's going to tell you a little bit about speech patterns and some of the things you can expect from each of the four styles. As an example, analyticals and amiables tend to talk a little slower. Drivers and expressives tend to talk much faster. Amiables and expressives tend to be a little happier for no reason. They tend to talk with their hands a little more and really use emotion as part of the way they convey a message. Drivers and analyticals don't always show as much emotion. That doesn't mean they don't have them. It just means that they reserve those for a time and a place. So take a moment, read through those explanations, learn a little bit more about each of the four styles. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how to determine what style other people are and then how to flex when you need to. Okay, we're back. Now, the last thing we want to address today is the concept of flexing. Let's talk a little bit about what flexing is. Being flexible in your communication style means you recognize your preferred style, but you also recognize the style of the person you're talking to, and you're going to present information in a way that they can best receive it. Why is that important? When you're asking somebody a question, you want to ask it in a way that makes them want to say yes. Asking it in their preferred style tends to make individuals more likely to give you an affirmative answer. The opposite is when you ask somebody a question, but you do it in a way that feels very off putting to them. Their first thought is, I'm going to find a way to say no to this person just because. Here's an example of that. Let's say you're working with your assistant, and your assistant happens to be an analytical, and you need a response from them. If you're a driver, your first thought may be, I'm going to go to them and I'm going to ask them for an answer and demand it right now. But analyticals like to have a moment to think things through and assess all the facts. So the better thing would be to send them an email and say, tomorrow I would love to have a conversation about X. At the end of that, it would be great if we could decide what way we're going to proceed. That gives that analytical time to do a bit of research, to start thinking about it, weigh out the options, and come to that meeting prepared to give an answer. Let's use another example. Let's say you're talking to an expressive and you need to get them to agree to something that normally they may not agree to. If you go in that meeting and you instantly start talking about work and you instantly start talking about what it is you need from them without asking how they're doing, what's going on in their world, they're going to feel like you're being rude. That's not your intent. But with communication, it's less about intent and more about impact. That's why you want to tailor your message to the way that your receiver can best hear it. So, when you flex, a couple of things are important. First, you need to be able to determine that person's style. You can do that in a number of ways. You can look at how they talk. It's pretty obvious from the animated sound to my voice, the amount I use my hands, the way I tend to talk about personal situations, that I'm an expressive. If it's somebody who tends to be a little more reserved, a little more thoughtful, if they ask more detailed questions, they may be an analytical.